So how would you feel about casting a vote for one of these leaders this fall? According to Nanos research, roughly 3/4 of Canadians are not in favor of an upcoming federal election, and the Globe and Mail editorial board argues it could be a dangerous distraction that would only serve the interest of very few. So that's the question. Do you have an appetite for a fall election? And we're going to go right to social media. Laka on Facebook said, such a bad move. There's so much on our plate with the burgeoning Delta variant. Give us a break. And Laka, yeah, I think the majority of people in government also feel the same way. They have very little appetite. They put a vote back in May, I believe, to the question of would it be irresponsible to hold an election during this pandemic? And I think it was 327-1 voted yes, it would be irresponsible, including every Liberal and including the Prime Minister.
And yet, I think it's because of the fact that we are in a minority government situation that there is this push towards it, because things just haven't been able to get done in the same way that maybe I think this government has hoped for.
Yeah, and in fact, I think the Prime Minister has hinted to that a few times, that there's like a legislative logjam. I think there's only eight government-sponsored non-COVID bills that have passed this year, which is like not a lot. And one of the reasons may be because, yes, the government is very busy, obviously, handling COVID on a federal level, but it's also because there is so much brinkmanship that has to happen between the parties in a minority situation to get stuff done. And so, obviously, if you see that there's a path towards a majority government, if you're the Liberal Party of Canada, you may say this may be our one small shot to not only get a majority, but to argue, at least for the average Canadian, that this is how we can actually get our agenda completed.
Do you think they'll get a majority,
without all of
though?
that back and forth? Listen, there's a risk to that. I think a lot of people are asking that question because the polling, the majority of the poll, a small majority, I think 54% of polling out there, if you aggregate them all, actually point to potentially another minority government, which would then leave us to be like, see, why did we do that in the first place? But that's
think about
democracy
the money spent.
and the money, sure, and us getting out of our houses, and how do we deal with that? And like our viewer said, there's a lot on our plates as Canadians. So is this the time? But if you are also an average Canadian and you're like, we got to get stuff done, we got to look not only at the pandemic, but certainly life, hopefully after the pandemic, you know that a majority government, if it aligns with your values, is one that potentially is going to get a lot more done more quickly.
That is true, but I still feel like the government, even though it is a minority government, is getting things done. We got that budget passed, which was huge. And I know out of the gate, Canada was not doing great in the vaccination department. But, you know, that is a huge badge of honor now that we are one of the most vaccinated countries in the world. So stuff is getting done. I worry about this chance of an election, which doesn't even sound like a chance. It does seem like every arrow is pointing towards the fact that we are going to have one. And I think it's telling that 19 MPs from all parties have recently announced that they're not going to run in the next election, which, technically speaking, the next election would be 2.5 years, away from now. It's like, you doth protest too much. Why are you coming out and telling us this now? Because they don't have an appetite for it, I think.
Well,
like the rest of the country.
Like most Canadians, I don't think, that is true. I, like most Canadians, don't want to look at an election. But at the same time, we said, we read that comment from a viewer saying nothing is getting done, or a lot of things need to get done. And the problem is that the reason why this is on the table is, as Mel said, things aren't getting done. And why? Because there doesn't seem to be any collaboration in government. We were in a meeting this morning and someone said, minority governments have worked in the past. Work has gotten done with minority governments. People have reached across the aisle. They have put bills forward together. I don't know if we can apply the same to 2021 and these times. And that is the thing. Like, more and more in Canadian government, we're seeing that it's getting more and more like American government, where everybody is just so divided. No one is willing to shake hands. And so, sure, we don't want an election, but also, do we want a standstill in what things get passed and don't get passed?
Even within parties, right?
Sure.
I'm thinking of the Green Party right now. Right, where
Yes.
everybody should be thinking about green issues. You've got the BC wildfires, you've got Northern Ontario.
Yes.
I mean, clearly the environment is giving us a very strong message. It should be top of mind. And the Green Party would
Cynthia.
get my vote in a second. But yeah, go,
So
Jess.
Cynthia, to your
I was
point,
just going to say, like, I totally agree. Like, the Green Party would have my vote right now if they were an actual Green Party instead of just imploding themselves.
well, here's the thing.
you
Like,
see-
they always
But
say,
that's the calculus
they always
Canadians
say
are
that's-
making.
They always say that the way for citizens to voice what they want is to go to the polls. So if we're not going to go to the polls, because yes, it costs a lot of money, no one has the appetite for it, how do we tell our elected officials that right now they suck? They need to start working together, collaborating. Like, what in a democracy is another mechanism for us to deliver that message if it isn't going to the polls? I think that's the question, because clearly it's broken.
Yeah, it is broken, but once someone gets voted in, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the conversation. I have been on the regular emailing my MP, and I hope that everybody is as active, because things change. My priorities change. What I want to see happen in government changes. And so it's not just once they get voted in and then you kind of sit back and just watch the flowers grow. There has to be a constant dialogue, I think, between citizens and their MPs, so that while we are in whatever situation we're in, that stuff is still getting done and our voice is still getting heard.
You're right, Mel. I mean, I'm in contact with my MP. Sometimes I don't think my MP is the problem. It's other MPs. Can I call other MPs and tell them to get on it? Because that would be great.